Raksha Bandhan or Rakhi is one of India's most heartfelt festivals, a celebration of sibling love, loyalty, and protection. But beyond the rituals and sweets, what really lies beneath that surface of siblinghood in Indian families? Have we ever thought about that? In most homes, siblings are not just playmates or confidants. They are emotional mirrors, competitors, memory keepers, but sometimes also quiet strangers, and most annoying as well. We explore this unique dynamic today, which may have been shaped by birth order, bound by rituals like Rakhi, complicated by gender, but most definitely tested by adulthood. In my books, Siblinghood is the most underdiscussed, underrated, and most unacknowledged, and yet perhaps the strongest blood bond that exists. Let's hear from four sets of siblings: a brother sister duo in their 20s and 30s, twins in their 40s, two sisters in their 50s, and two brothers in their 70s.
We used to fight a lot. We used to have a lot of quarrels. He used to tease me. When we became adults, it is then that we actually connected.
She was a person who was academically very sound, and she had to fulfill all the dreams of my parents. I guess my parents had given up on me. Could we used to feel that she needs a elder brother to go to. But I guess I was closed in my head or probably zoned out. I do realize that while growing up, a girl has to go through a lot of things and you can't talk to your parents about everything. I could have been there.
I think, when people evolve themselves, when their relationships also evolve, I think I'm really proud of both of us, especially since I got into yoga, meditation. That helped me understand myself better. When I had that understanding about myself, I could also then extrapolate it to other people. Also, Bhaiya, over the last few years, since he got into gymming and fitness, he really developed that growth mindset in him, which not just affected his physical fitness or mental fitness, but also his relationships with me, with our parents. We actively try and listen to each other.
I think over time, one thing that I realized was that I was too consumed by myself. There are times when she needs me as well. That's how our actually relationship evolved. That, when I thought of her as not a superhuman, but my sister who could actually need me, it's very important to cherish the things that you have.
Bhaiya and I last year we went on this road trip together, and we drove from Pune to Goa, and we had a really good time connecting with each other during that trip. And we talked a lot. That was the first time I kind of opened up to him. You must also be willing to listen, not just talk.
I think the only way is to talk it out with your sibling, because most of the time there is this ego thing that comes into play. We are waiting for the other person to do the talking. The most important thing is one has to realize that we have very limited time on this earth. We don't know what is going to happen next moment, but we wait and wait.
The movies and entertainment have sort of talked about this telepathy between twins, but it doesn't exist in the literal sense of the word. But it does exist in the sense that we are quite in sync with each other, I feel. You're so close, you're being brought up together.
I mean, we've grown up together, not just living in the house, but the school and the university. So, yes, the connection is very strong.
He was the first person I came out to. So, had there been rejection there, it would have been devastating.
The fact that he came out to me and I'm the first person hearing it or knowing it was I mean, very heartening for me. I knew it for like ages before that my brother swings the other way. I feel that I could have done more if I would have known more. We don't have sit down conversations. It's only when things flare up that we come and address the core issue of the problem, whether it's a misunderstanding or whether it's a disagreement. And that happens during tense moments, which probably is not the right way of dealing with it.
Because we live such different lives. That happens not just with Aditya, but even with my sister. That so whenever the three of us sort of really meet in physical, we have that one moment where we are like, okay, trying to understand how our lives are shaping us differently, but at the same time trying to find that common ground and keep that glue intact that binds us.
We are in touch almost every day of our lives. But the conversations are very basic, like how I would call my parents and say, everything is okay. And the expectation was that, okay, fine, you come back from South Sudan or Iraq or wherever, right? You expect your own brother to indulge in you and ask you. I'm not somebody who shares a lot. So that's probably my fault in the entire scheme of things.
But whenever the going gets really tough for either of us, we do reach out to each other. Most parents would probably just sort of walk away from the situation, so they don't allow a negative emotion to fester between them and their own family members, their friends, and that is a similar expectation that they have with all of us also, that if it's a negative emotion, discuss it, move on very quickly.
The bonding is so strong that yes, me and my brother or my sister or even my parents, we might have our emotional outbursts, right? But in a matter of minutes, or I think, let's say, we maximum a day, everything falls back to normal.
It's okay to have a different point of opinion. If you find that you are still agreeing on the fundamentals of what defines your relationship, then there's still scope to restore it. And that will only happen with conversation. Try to understand where the other person is coming from.
See, there is always sibling hierarchy or rivalry. What is most important is to acknowledge that. What people don't do this in this day and age of overload of information and everything is they don't listen, or they don't interpret signs or body language or whatever. Maybe somebody just venting out. Try to work the way things work for them.
Chalo, send me some money now.
That's the sore point in the relationship.
Painful.
Allah.
Very painful. She was a bully growing up, but she's
Oh
improved
God, such a
now.
big lie.
Yeah, you were a bully. I mean, you used to beat me up. She threw keys at me, bruised me.
She was a smarter sister, you can say. Na?
If you say so.
I was taking advantage of my being the elder one. No? She used to hate me all the time no, because of that. She used to love the other people's sisters. We used to fight like cats and dogs. We used to hit each other, and then we used to have silent fights, like the parents don't come to know.
I always used to think I'm adopted,
Right.
white skinned with very light hair. So I actually grew up believing that. And how mothers were like, Mummy, am I adopted? And she would go, हाँ तुम्हें तो कचरे से उठा के लाया. And I actually used to believe that.
I am a very direct person, so I don't go beating around the bush.
I don't think we've ever had any conflict as such. If she feels I'm not doing right by my kids or something, or I'm feeling that about her, we will just tell each other. You might feel bad in that moment that you're attacking my motherhood, or you're attacking my being a good daughter or whatever, but I think we just come out and say it, and then we talk through it and it's done. But there's never been anything ki itna bada ki we stop talking to each other.
Anger sometimes at
Disagreement.
each other, but then we show it. I especially show it.
Yeah, she shows it.
Not even 1 hour. I think we just get angry and we just move on, and next moment we are talking to each other again like normal. I feel I'm blessed to actually take care of them. When she was needed, I told her, Afrin, you come and take care of mom and dad for a month or so, whatever. Otherwise, whatever she can do from there, she does. One son of mine is her third child there already.
The elder two kids I have literally brought up. I think they even listened to me probably more than their own mother because I was the fun khala to be around. Now I am happy that my boys, especially my older son, keeps in touch with everybody. And he does keep in touch with her son also. Like just the other day, I walked in and they were talking on the phone. They make an effort to meet. I don't think we say it enough that I love you, Behan.
I say I love you, Behna. I say it.
It makes a difference how much interaction you are having in creating a relationship.
It evolves when you enjoy each other's company. Whatever you communicate, talk, you enjoy that. When the trust keeps happening as you grow older, then the relationship becomes much more meaningful also.
Basically, I think communication is the most important part of evolving or getting your relationship stronger. Rakesh, we traveled together. We have done a lot of things together pretty much for the last 40, 50 years, and it has to be nurtured both ways.
Communication is not just talking. Communication also is something what you are telling the other person. And if the other person also feels that he's getting some value out of what is being talked, like, when you try to share some of your problems with whoever, let's say with sibling only, and the other person is listening to it carefully and then is able to give you some feedback in return, then the two-way thing that happens is a communication.
Putting yourself in the other person's shoes to understand that what the other person is saying, and it has to be both ways.
I can count on him. That's the best thing. Most annoying thing, he doesn't live close by.
Rakesh ke baare mein, from childhood, he is always trying to help. किसी तरह से कुछ भी करना हो, पापा के जब थे तो he's trying to do things with Papa. He has helped me quite a bit, over years. There's a long story for 50 years, किस तरह से कैसे हुआ. So that's the best part about him is all these years, I remember every incident that happened. I don't know if there is an annoying thing I can remember truthfully, so that means there's not much annoying thing.
These are just 4 sibling duos, but each and every sibling relationship is unique and should not and cannot be compared. I'm now joined by clinical psychologist Dr. Vandita Dubey, who has deep insight into family dynamics in our Indian context. We look at this germination of conflict among siblings and how that sometimes can actually be quite healthy. But the most important aspect is how do we move on from conflict, anger, and resentment? How can these bonds evolve instead of just being endured as we move through life? And more importantly, how to make the best of this unique relationship that is bound by blood. So whether you're the oldest, the youngest, the absent one, or the always responsible one, this conversation is for you. Thank you, Doc, for joining me on Zen-Brain.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Doc, let's get into it. Why are siblings so different from each other, despite having grown up with the same set of parents and the same environment? Let's get that context.
Well, siblings are also individuals, right? And each individual, each baby that's born, each human being has their own unique temperament, right? So, you have your own temperament, which then kind of, in some ways, mediates what you experience growing up. So the same situation is experienced differently by 2 different people because unless, of course, you're twins, you're also born at different times in a parent's life. And all those factors then also come in the parents' age, their experience, their state of mind, whatever's going on in their lives, and so on and so forth. So for all those reasons, it's, each human being is different, and therefore each sibling is different.
Someone very wisely once said, even siblings are born to different set of parents. Parents, when the first child was born, were very different from when the second child and the third child are born. What factors really influence sibling relationships and how they relate to each other? Would you say it, whether it's age, whether it's gender, how siblings perceive their place in the family?
So there are many factors that affect, and the thing is, it's also not the same for each family. There are wide differences between families. Gender is one of those things that affects how siblings will relate, how they view themselves, how they view their brother or sister. Birth order, and I mean, there are lots of different kinds of theories around that. But what is definitely a fact, and across cultures, is that being the older sibling in a pair or in multiple siblings, being the older brother or sister, and especially sisters, get into caregiving roles. So, that shapes how then that sister will look at herself, her role in the family, and how the other siblings will view that sister. The larger cultural context, but also within each family has its own culture. How much do you focus on this whole hierarchy of the person is older, therefore they get respect and they have the last say on things, versus how you treat siblings as more equal, or it's a more egalitarian thing, how top down. And then there's circumstances. If you have a family where the older child has to get into a role of caretaking, then that is going to determine things.
Doc, since we're talking about gender, would you say largely in Indian families, there are gender stereotypes that you grew up with? In most families. And have you found, in your experience, a lot of resentment stems from there, of perceived favoritism or perceived way in which the boys are kind of perceived from outside, not necessarily even the parents or the unit, but from relatives, and how boys are, almost placed on a pedestal for no reason?
Sure, definitely. I mean, I think gender plays a role, and how gendered behavior is expected from boys, which is different for boys and girls. And like you said, sometimes, of course, it's very overt and very clear within the family, right? That, boys get to do X, or they have access to certain resources, or, they're treated in a certain way, which is different from girls, right? When it's very obvious and clear, then of course, then that's what it is. See, all of us are socialized, parents are also socialized. They also have internalized certain messages from their growing up years and the society, the times that they have grown up in, and their families. And those get passed on in very subtle ways. And also, like you said, it's reinforced often in ways by other family members or relatives, or, neighbors or whatever. I mean, even things like, okay, expecting the girl to go into the kitchen and help the mom, serve when there are guests in the house, or to tidy up, or, to, wash their clothes or whatever it is, versus not expecting that from boys, or, if a boy wants to stay out late playing till late in the night, that's okay. But for the girl to be out playing till late at night may not be considered okay, right? So now, where does safety come in? Is it gender? Of course, all these things are a little more complex. Of course, there are realities to things, but a lot of it is also just gender and the way we see gender roles differently.
Now that we are talking about gender and reinforcement of certain messages, whether they are done subtly or overtly, even, how men are asked to express themselves in a patriarchal society like ours also ends up affecting how they handle mental health issues, for instance, how they tackle stress. What, in your experience, has been siblings growing up in the same household, and how girls and boys express themselves
differently? Of course, I mean, these are generalizations, so it won't be true for each and every family. Often what one does see is that, boys carry the expectation of being providers and protectors and have a presence in the outside world. They have to find a way for themselves to succeed in whatever way, whether it's the school, career, get a job quickly, stand on your 2 feet, be independent, take care of people, So they do carry that conscious and unconscious burden of that. stated and unstated burden of that. And also, I think nurturing behavior is discouraged. If there is a boy who just wants to be home and play with dolls, that's almost unheard of. You can play with cars, you can play with action figures, which are substitute dolls, but you can't play with dolls, right? You can't play home, you can't play house. The more softer, emotional, caretaking, caregiving aspects are more put on the girl's shoulders, whereas the more go out there, prove yourself, take care of things, protect everybody, provide for things is placed on boys. And that's what you grow up with. And then that's how you see your roles. And that's how when life throws curveballs at you and you have to do things the other way, it becomes very difficult. Emotional expression is one of those very big issues that divides how boys and girls or men and women express themselves and what is considered okay and what is not considered okay. And therefore, like you said, then a lot of mental health issues on both sides, for men as well as for women in different ways.
The reason why I asked that is that when I was speaking to the various siblings in a boy-girl scenario, and I have been part of the boy-girl, brother-sister scenario, my brother was the really unexpressive, quiet sort, while I was perhaps over-expressive growing up. And I think the roles changed, the personality changed when we grew up. While growing up as a brother-sister, in India, that's my opinion, and I could be completely off the mark, but this is my own experience, is that it's a very make-believe relationship. You like, my brother was more in my head than in reality. He was something I had built up, or my parents had built up. The protector, the guy who ties you a Rakhi. And since we went to do different boarding schools, we didn't have much connection. It was only after we started living together that we got to understand each other, and it was not easy. And so sibling relationships are not as assumed, that assumed easiness that we talk about. It needs work. Just as friendships need work, siblinghood needs work. And one of the things that I've learned from interviewing the various siblings is that they've all worked on it. And they have such fabulous relationships. It's one of those relationships which are, almost handed to you, ready to make into a best friend. And it's some people who kind of acknowledge it and move forward with it. And some, there is a lot of conflict and egos come in, and one waits for the other to make a move. I mean, the point that I'm making is really that conflict is good sometimes. It's good to get it all out there. And then the most important part is you need to move from conflict. So, Doc, in your opinion, even as a clinical psychologist, have there been many occasions or instances where sibling bonds have come up, and how have they moved forward?
Just to underscore the point that you're making, that, siblings are the first playmates that you have. They are the first friends that you have, because they're there, they're in the house with you, and that's where you explore relationships. It's a very different thing between a parent and a child. Relationship is a dependent, and it's a very different relationship. Whereas a sibling is is your generation. It's more of an equal kind of a relationship. Now, there may be inequality in that. They are actually your first playmates. They are your first friends. And a lot of what you learn about how to negotiate relationships and how to express yourself and how to express differences. And that's where, you could call it conflict, because there will be conflict, right? Because there will be times when you want the same toy, you want different things, and you have to negotiate that. So how conflict is expressed, how you deal with that conflict, how you negotiate, how do you resolve or you don't resolve, how equipped you feel or how powerless you feel in a relationship, especially when there is conflict or when there is a power struggle. And all of us have conflict and all of us have power struggles in our lives, right? It's the learning ground. For example, in my practice, the adults that I work with, sibling relationships do come up a lot of the times, whether in the context of feeling like you're supported by a sibling and they're there for you, or it's a bittersweet relationship, or there is conflict. I mean, there are those instances, but I think they are rare, where it's like a hate-hate relationship. Mostly it may be a love-hate relationship, or it would be more of a supportive relationship, or there might be some irritants and frustrations and some things that you don't like about the other person, their personality, their behavior, whatever it is, and that kind of a thing. Relationships, of course, evolve through life as we evolve through life. The nature of relationships change. Unfortunately, if there's been a lot of conflict and there's a lot of perceived favoritism that somebody's experienced, like they think that their sibling was favored by the parents, which may or may not be so. And there's a lot of resentment that's been carried over into adulthood. Then also, I think for most adults, at some point in their growing up journey, in their adulthood, they're able to kind of move past it. But then there are cases where people are not able to get past it and they still hold on. And family relationships can sometimes be quite complicated because the parents also play a role. And if that perceived favoritism has some element of truth to it and it gets reinforced, I think one of the tricky things that adult siblings have to negotiate is when there are other relationships that enter their life, boyfriend, girlfriend, son-in-law, daughter-in-law, whoever, right? So then what will those new relationships look like and how you make space for them? And then the other is material possessions. Things may be okay, but then they can turn rocky when it comes to inheritance and who gets what and how is it divided and whether it's saris or jewelry or property or things like that. So it's that human thing from childhood to our deathbed. We're always worried about fairness. Is this fair to me? Is this fair? Is this unfair? And that comes up, of course, in sibling relationships also.
You speak across the board to siblings, and the youngest sibling is always teased and told that they are adopted. Did that ever happen to you? I remember being told I was picked up in the dump. For a couple of years, you spend thinking about the fact that what if I am really, you know? I think that's trauma. That's real trauma by siblings. I love how you've mentioned that it can't really be a hate-hate relationship. It may be a love-hate relationships, but would you agree that it's one of those relationships which carry a lot of baggage and you can choose what to do with that baggage? You can
Sure.
either look at it and say, this is somebody who I've grown up with. They would understand. And Doc, correct me if I'm wrong. Mostly, it's siblings who step up in times of real crisis. In fact, they are most unacknowledged. Understanding that this is a very special relationship, that you can't lose this with ego hassles and hate and resentment. How does one get past this?
In a relationship, I mean, there are two parts to it. One is, of course, you have to sort things out in your own head. And then you have to sort things out in the relationship. Sorting things out in one's own head means, first of all, taking a decision not to carry the baggage along with you. It is baggage. It's a burden, right? I mean, something may have happened or may not have happened a long time ago. It's also what you remember, what you don't remember. The memories itself is questionable. Carrying all that hurt and resentment and anger, I mean, whatever's happened has happened. But when we carry all of that along, it's in the present, it's current, it's live, it stays live, and it affects us in the moment, right? And so you really have to look at how much value does that have? Does it have any value? Is it helping you in any way? So I think the first decision is really to decide to kind of leave some of that baggage behind. And that's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's possible, and people do it. Letting go of the resentments, the hurt, the anger. If you're able to let go of it, then any relationship actually becomes much smoother, because then you're not approaching the other person with that baggage. And when you don't have that baggage, then it's a lot easier to relate to anyone, to accept anybody. The first step is that. And the second step is then, of course, reaching out to your sibling and not waiting for them to reach out to you, but reaching out and having a conversation that is not loaded. Sometimes it may be that you do need to talk about something from the past. So that's something that one has to decide for oneself, whether these are petty things, relatively speaking, that you can let go of, or they are really important issues that need resolution. And then in that case, it's important to have that conversation and see how that goes. Of course, it's again the two people who are involved. So, you can put in an effort. The other person also needs to be willing to make that effort to make it work.
I think you've reiterated this in many discussions, is that two people could face the same situation and yet leave away with different experiences, right? Their perception might be different. And I think that especially holds true for siblings. Each may have an interpretation that may be true to them, may not be true to the other person. And I think just understanding that aspect, that we are different human beings and our perception of that particular incident or occurrence or what was said was very different. And moving on. And the other thing is, Doc, picking battles, not to rake up the past which you can't resolve. But you can understand that there is this individual or individuals who are there who you're bound by blood. In no uncertain terms, they are the closest that you have. And no matter the baggage, no matter everything, it's very important to pick your battles and not keep going back to the past hurts. How do you ensure that?
I think people keep going back to battles when there is a feeling that something is not being resolved, or you feel that there is something that is still unsaid, or there is still something that's unfair, or there's an apology that you still feel you deserve but you didn't get. So there's something that's holding one back, right? So often it's about figuring out what it is that's holding one back. Why are you going back to the same thing? What is it about it that's an obstacle? And once one has figured out what that is, then it's easier to move on from there. So often it's just thinking about, what is it that you do really want from the other person? What is it that you need from them? Are you looking for an apology? Are you looking for a reparation? Are you looking for, some acknowledgement of something? I mean, what are you looking for from the other person? And sometimes it's also just stating it, saying, I need this from you for to be able to move on. If that's what's really holding you up and you can't move on, then then I guess the other thing is to state it, take responsibility for it, saying, you're feeling this way because this is what you need in order to be able to move on.
Since you mentioned that it's important for the person who is seeking that apology to understand why and what they expect from the other sibling, instead of blaming the sibling, important for us all to also look at ourselves and see what is it that we might have added to the situation, rather than simply blaming the other person.
Of course, it's always easier to blame somebody else, right? I mean, that's true for all of us in all kinds of situations. So what you're saying is right, that you do have to look into what it is, and what is it that's stopping you? What's the obstacle for you? What is it that you're holding on? Why are you holding on to it? So it is about reflecting, self-reflection, and figuring out. Sometimes also it's about getting perspective. So, if you were to say, okay, fine, it's not me, but somebody else, these are two siblings, and this is what happened. How big a deal is it? What else could have been happening? Or what are other explanations that could be out there, other than what one holds as an explanation, but what else? How else can one look at it? What else could be possible, could be going on for the other person or in that situation? And sometimes just taking that perspective, or just stepping out of the whole thing. It's like, you're an outsider looking in. You're able to see that, okay, it could be that there are other explanations. It could be that it's not such a big deal. And there are other ways to look at it, and then therefore let go of whatever one is holding on to. So a lot of times it is that. I think there's another thing, which is also a fact, that it would be a lot easier for all of us if everybody we interacted with, especially people who are close to, friends, spouse, family, if they all behaved in the ways that we wanted them to behave it, right? To be the people that we wanted them to be. But that's not going to be possible, right? Everybody will be whoever they will be in the moment and otherwise. And so there is also a big place that acceptance takes in any relationship, and definitely in sibling relationships. So you may think that the sibling is very annoying because they always have the last word in a discussion, or they seem very high-handed in the way they talk to you, or whatever it is, right, that bothers you. And the thing is, it's possible that it is so. It may be very true that is so, because that's how the dynamic got set up. That's how it's been for so many years, and that's become their habit, their habitual way of relating to you, right? Of course, can it be changed? Yes, it can be changed, and you can give feedback, and they may be able to change it. But it's also possible they may not be able to change it, because change is not easy. I mean, it's really hard, even for ourselves, to make a change. So expecting somebody else to make a change may happen, may not happen. So what if it does not happen? Then you have to say, okay, fine, yeah, okay, they have this annoying habit, or they have this annoying way of being or talking or whatever it is, but it's okay. If that's a surface thing, but underneath, they really care. We like them, we don't like them, but we do think about them. And if you're thinking about something, then you do care enough. Or if somebody is thinking about you, they do care enough. So underneath the anger and the frustration and irritation, would be that the person matters, therefore you're thinking about them. If they didn't matter, you wouldn't give a thought.
And a dash of humor always helps, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love what you said. I mean, you think about them because you care. And never to forget that siblings care for each other, whether they acknowledge it and accept it or say it to the other person, it is something that exists. It's that silence that we speak of, right?
Yeah.
Might be wrapped in resentment, wrapped in the baggage that we spoke about, but there is tremendous attachment and tremendous love. And I think we should spend, when we talk about Rakhi and we talk about rituals, we should also move beyond these rituals and think about what these relationships are really that we simply haven't acknowledged. We assume that they will be there when we need them, but we won't be grateful enough. I think it's time to move beyond that. I think it's time to acknowledge sibling relationships and their importance. I don't think as a society, I think very few of us have done that. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I mean sibling relationships in many ways I think of course like you said do often go acknowledged and they are the I guess the most underrated important relationships in our lives, and and I think especially in adult lives everybody goes through the phase of where you get into a relationship, you may get married or you may perhaps have kids or have a career and you have living your own life and you're busy with all of that, but there is this constant which is there, so your family is a constant which stays there, whether it's like the in some ways I think it's like the money plant that keeps growing usually, whether you give it too much care or you don't give it too much care, it's usually there, usually, unless you're like me, a complete not green
Siblings
thumb,
are like
but
money plants. They grow everywhere. They just grow.
they grow, or grass that grows or whatever. I mean, it will grow whether you think of calling your sibling once in a year or once in 2 years. That relationship is there. It's not like friends who or other relationships where they need more tending.
I love it. I love it. That's going down in one of the quotes, right? Siblings are like money plants. They don't need that much care, but they grow anyway. Yes.
The other aspect is actually that is true also, that they are a big source of support. And like you said, any kind of trouble, even for, I know lots of families, even when it's financial trouble, that's who you kind of lean on to, or other kinds of support that you need. So
Absolutely. I mean, across the board. And
yeah.
they do land up, they are there, and you still fail to acknowledge them. What, in your experience, has been the case when a third person comes in and often it leads to siblings getting closer or drifting apart? And how can siblings then, maintain closeness without letting it affect their own family unit, so to speak?
People do make space for the third person who enters, whether it's a husband or wife or whoever, right? Most families are able to give that space and things like that. It's also true that sometimes it complicates things a lot. I guess for the simple reason that there are all kinds of people out there and there are all kinds of human beings with all kinds of motivations. So it can be that a husband or a wife may be very possessive or protective or about their family or about their unit or their spouse, and or there are or more controlling, in some cases really controlling, in some cases abusive, and then that is of course a bit of an extreme case, as an extreme scenario where it becomes very difficult to then maintain a relationship with your family of origin, with your siblings, even with your parents, right? So that's a situation that requires a very different kind of intervention, right? I mean, you need to figure out what you want to do with your life and you want to be in that relationship or not, and so on and so forth. There, it's more complicated. But by and large, what I've seen is when siblings make a little bit of an effort, often, to make space for the new person, by and large, it works out. There might be minor irritants or things that you don't like and stuff like that, but by and large, it's a relationship that works out. But again, like I said, it's the two things that are important. One is, I think, creating an independent relationship with the new person who's come in, if they're open to it, so that it's not always via your brother or sister. You're not relating to them via somebody else, if it's possible, right? And the other thing is also just giving space.
When a third person comes in, it's important also for you to acknowledge the third person individually rather than just relate through siblings. Yes, we have in our culture, to keep that distance with the third person, so to speak. But it's important to acknowledge because your relationship with your siblings can only get better. Do you feel that most families, most siblings do not do that? Do not make the extra effort to engage with the person who's come in?
I think sometimes that gets neglected for whatever reason. And you're busy in your own life, or it's a new person, you're unsure of whether they would.
Or you're simply not taught, Doc.
Sometimes there's this fear of this third person coming in and what that might mean for your own relationship. So there is an insecurity there. And it happens that if parents are feeling insecure, then that gets transferred to siblings also feeling insecure, saying, oh, there's this spouse that's come in, now the sibling will not have any time with us and for us, and so on and so forth. Sometimes it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You kind of expect that to happen, and then so you will not make space and accommodate and adjust because it's a new person. Of course, it'll need accommodation, adjustment on both sides. And that doesn't happen. And then there is a rift that gets created and that this just widens. And then it happens. I mean, one also sees that, right? In families where then a sibling would move out or move away or disconnect for a while or whatever with the family, and those kinds of things happen. So you're right. I mean, in many ways, we're not taught, and there is, I think, also sometimes this fear.
The blueprint of how we are expressing ourselves in relationships is pretty much shaped by the adults we grow up with. In our cases, it would be parents. And we kind of follow their template into how they deal with their parents and their siblings, and we kind of replicate that. Sometimes those blueprints could be wrong, and
Yeah.
you need to navigate your own way with your sibling. And I think it's important to put this point across that not everything that is handed over to you may be the best way to handle things. You have to figure out as an adult on what suits you and your sibling going forward.
As children, what are the attitudes and what are the, the thoughts that we assimilate in a way, and we kind of absorb. You're right. The attitude towards a sibling, or whether you trust your sibling or you don't trust your sibling, is it a easy relationship? Is it a very difficult relationship? Do you feel like you have to fight for everything? You feel that they'll be there for you, they're a source of support or not? All of those things are, yes, the first template that we have for it is what we see in our families, what we see being played out in our families. So if our parents have had close relationships with their siblings and they set that as a template for us, then often that's what one internalizes, that, okay, siblings are people that you can depend on and you can be close to and you can work things out with, and all of that stuff. Whereas if there is a lot of it's very fractured. If there's a lot of conflict and a lot of negativity or lack of trust or outright fights, siblings have broken off and disengaged. If that's the template, then that's what you see. You may end up viewing your relationship to be kind of the same, or that's the expectations that you may end up having. That's a huge loss, because siblings are, the sources of support that are always there for us. There are the relationships where we don't have to work so hard. We don't have to be somebody else. We don't have to pretend. We don't have to nurture even to that extent. And they're there. If what one has witnessed or experienced is a lot of lack of trust or conflict or, all of that stuff, then it's about really thinking about, it has to be a very conscious, thought through decision not to repeat that pattern with one's own sibling, and to make it different from what it was in terms of one's parents. That will take a little more effort, because then you have to make a conscious effort for in terms of checking your own expectations and checking your own thoughts about what this relationship is meant to be like, and can you trust your sibling, can you not trust them? All of those things. Work through those things in one's mind and make a conscious effort to communicate and to build a different relationship with their sibling.
Interestingly, all the siblings that we spoke to
Mm-hmm.
ultimately have ended up traveling together, right? And
Okay.
their spending that much time together
Mm.
has kind of paved the way for their families also to travel together and spend time together.
Mhm.
So I think, when you speak about trust, when you speak about really acknowledging the other relationship, I mean, travel is one of the ways to do it, really. Not necessarily just time arguing and discussing things and trying to flesh out things, but just having an enjoyable time
Mhm.
together.
Having fun together. Yeah, absolutely. Those are the times when one bonds, right? That's what one calls bonding. While we said that sibling relationships are like money plants, but they do need the occasional watering, they do need the putting them in the sunlight and so on. It's also not to completely take it for granted. And absolutely, in terms of what you're saying, it is true that where families spend time together having fun, and not just in circumstances where something needs to get done or somebody needs to be taken care of and so on, and or there's a crisis, but also in other times. And I think that's why we have a lot of festivals, right? It is family time. You get together with your family. It's a societal way of creating that time for bonding, but of course it can be outside of that as well. Do a vacation together, holiday together. It does make it easier as a family when you meet more frequently. Then it makes it easier all around because your kids get to know their cousins, they enjoy spending time with them. There is a relationship that gets built there, so that helps everybody stay together. Where if you just don't meet at all, then it's a lot harder because then you're like strangers, and your kids are like strangers with each other, and that relationship doesn't get a chance to develop as much.
Siblings that laugh together, stay together, but also, just take that time out to get to know them as individuals because they're different from what you were in childhood.
There's this element, what you're talking about in terms of how, we all change. We change. We're very different from how we were as kids, but then also through our adult lives, we change. I think this piece of accommodating the new person, accommodating the changes that are happening in the other person, I think that's a very important piece of relating to them as they are now rather than how you remember them as being 15 years ago or 20 or 30 years ago. I think first of all is just relating with them as an adult, as you would with any other adult that you meet, giving them that kind of attention and respect and accepting their individuality. So there is this mental adjustment that one has to make, which I think, like you said, naturally we do tend to make, but sometimes when people are not able to make it is when you have more of a problem, because that's where those issues come up of, I'm not the little child anymore. Why is my sibling speaking to me still like I was a 10-year-old or 15-year-old or whatever, right? And you feel minimized, you feel disrespected. Like you said, I mean, some of it happens automatically, but I think the other way to really look at it also, if one wants to do it much more consciously, is to really look at your sibling as a grown-up adult that you're meeting, and as you would be curious about any other adult, and you would be open to them, to learning about them as to who they are now, what's important to them, what's not, and how do they think about things, how to deal with things, their views. I think that would make it easier, because that's a way to get to know somebody as they are in the moment.
So when siblings get to a point where they refuse to talk to each other, there's much resentment, there is ego hassles. What is the role that parents could have played in such a scenario?
I mean, parents have a huge role to play in the initial years, of course, because when you're growing up, you are with them, and they are the ones who are setting expectations about how things will be and what's okay and what's not okay and so on. In those years, of course, parents have a huge role to play in terms of watching out for any kind of overt favoritism, distinctions that get created. And also, if one sibling is feeling that way, then also addressing that, taking it up seriously and doing something about it if it's possible. So there's some little bit of research here and there about it. Is also, this whole thing of not getting into sibling fights, not taking sides, because that's how kids figure things out on their own. I mean, it's like when they go down to the playground as well. They play with their friends, they have fights with their friends. If no adult intervenes, they also figure out how to resolve that fight. Usually, unless, of course, it's an extreme case where somebody is being abusive, there's a bully or there's abuse going on. But in the normal scheme of things, kids figure out And that's the same thing with siblings that they figure out. So as long as you stay out of it and don't favor one over the other or take one side, over the other person's side, that sets up the relationship in such a way where, as the kids become teenagers, as they become young adults, as they become older adults, they're able to figure things out on their own, and they're able to look at each other as without the baggage of perceived favoritism and perceived slights and so on.
Where the parents have played a role in, the kind of sibling rivalry that exists because they have appreciated and acknowledged one child and dismissed the other. Not perhaps, and one of the most common in India is not being that great at academics and constantly being poked about it and compared. So in a sense, parents do have a role to play.
Parents absolutely have a role to play, but their influence is a lot more when kids are younger. When you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, it matters what they say, but it matters less and less. So now if you're two 50-year-olds fighting and you have a 70-year-old, 80-year-old parent, what they say is not going to make a huge difference to you at this point in your life. If the rivalry or whatever you want to call it, the friction between the siblings or whatever has happened has grown over the years, then there isn't much that can be done at that point in time, right? So the biggest role that you have is when kids are still in your own house, in terms of resolving things or in terms of not making those kinds of statements or comparing one with the other, or putting down one in front of the other, or taking sides between the two, and those things. So it's important not to do those things. People sometimes do that, and sometimes it's done in the spirit of trying to encourage the, like you said, academics, for example. You're trying to get the other one to study harder or to do as well. You want them to succeed, and the way you end up doing that is by comparing them with the other sibling or comparing them with somebody outside the house as well. Comparisons are always have a very negative impact. Those create this sense that, okay, you favor the other one, you don't like me, you don't appreciate me, and so on. In the life of adult siblings, the place where sometimes friction specifically comes up is when it comes to money and possessions. The only other thing is then taking care of the elderly parents. So who's going to take care of the elderly parents? How much is somebody taking care of the elderly parents? What role is somebody playing or not playing? So those become issues. If parents can foresee these and sort these out earlier, or in a way that's fair as can be for the siblings, then sometimes these things can be avoided.
It's common to hear of a sibling moving abroad, only one sibling taking care of the parents. But how does one resolve them when it is there? It's easy for us to say, oh, get over it. But these are like lifelong grievances, resentments that have kind of like blown out of proportion. How does one move forward?
Communication is important, and communication not just in terms of blame. You're not doing this, or you're not doing that, or you got too much of this, or I didn't get enough of that. But okay, if you do find yourself in that situation where it's happened, and now there is conflict, and there is this unhappiness around whether it's taking care of elderly or how possessions have been divided. There, I think it's important to sit down and have a mature conversation, really. Before you sit down to have that conversation, sort out in your own head, what is it that's upsetting? Is it really that you need that particular pair of whatever it is, in terms of possessions? Is it really about that? Or is it a hurt, a perceived hurt about, oh, so and so, my parents didn't think about me. They've been partial to the sibling and therefore they've done this. Sometimes it's not so much about the material things as much as it is about what those things stand for or what they represent to someone. If that means that parents have been partial or that's favoritism or, whatever it is. And then one can have a conversation with the sibling about it, figure out how to resolve it. If the sibling had nothing to do with it, and it's the parents who've left this and that, it could be for many reasons why that's happened. So if one is able to figure that out and let go, then in one's own head, then that's the end of it. But if you're not able to, then it's to sit down with the other person and say, okay, I'm feeling hurt. Parents left you this, or they did this for you. and I feel that it's unfair, and it may be that the sibling is open to hearing that and may even clarify that. Usually it's that case, right, where you feel that the other sibling is favored and the other sibling doesn't think that is so. They haven't perceived it that way.
Sometimes I think external parties add to the problems. Siblings also need to stay alert on the influence that third parties have and try and engage one on one and to resolve these issues. And one of the very important things that came up in amongst the sibling interviews that I did was that when certain issues come up, they speak to the other person one on one and tell them exactly what they feel and allow the other person to explain themselves. And usually they move on very quickly. So I want to emphasize again, not all conflict is bad. The question is to move on from it, move on quickly, move on positively from it. Not everything needs to be 100% resolved, but you can work towards improving it gradually. And therefore, if you trust the individual, doubting the intention of the other person, if the other person doesn't trust your intention, there is no way you can communicate with the other. This doubting the other person's intention is, I think, one of the major reasons for sibling rivalry because they doubt the other person. There is no trust. How do you build trust amongst siblings when it's lost?
See, building trust in any relationship takes work, and often it takes work from both sides. One is, I mean, it is true that trust is earned. If somebody, has lost your trust, what that means is that they've done something or they've not done certain things, because of which now you're doubting their word, or doubting their actions or whatever. In order to earn trust back, there have to be very visible actions. Like, it can't just be words. I can't. It just can't be. Oh yeah, just trust me. That doesn't lead to trust. So of course, it's important to talk about what led to the loss of trust and why, and if to have that conversation, but then also to figure out what it would need for one person to earn the other person's trust back again. What is it that you need to see? What are the actions that you need to see? Those need to be specified as well. If the person is able to consistently carry out those actions, then trust will slowly get built again. It can get built again, right? But it can't just be words. It also has to translate into actions.
It's extremely conflicting, actually. On one hand, siblings talk about eroding trust. On the other hand, when they are in a deep crisis, that's the person they call. Could be perhaps not trust issues at all.
It's also that human beings are complex. And it could be that you don't trust your sibling on financial matters, but you will trust them with your life. And that just could be how it is. That's the beauty of sibling relationships, that with somebody else, you may only look at one parameter and say, okay, I've lost trust in terms of this one parameter, and I don't think it's worth it looking at the other parameters. Whereas with siblings, you can do that. There are multiple parameters. So on certain parameters, you may absolutely not see eye to eye, or you may have no trust when it comes to that. But when it's a life or death situation, then yes, you may very well rely on each other, and the sibling may actually deliver on that.
Mostly all siblings deliver on that.
Mostly. So I think it's so important to also, when you talk about siblings, there's always exceptions, and they're siblings who murdered each other, right? So I mean, that also exists. So not to say that it's all hunky-dory always, but by and large, yes.
It's not hunky-dory. No relationship is. We take the time and we make the effort for other relationships. Unfortunately, very few of us make that effort for sibling relationships. Like you said, it's like a money plant. It'll grow on its own. We assume that.
And the more attention you get, the more it thrives, right? The brighter it is, the happier you feel with it.
Absolutely. Doc, what would a healthy sibling relationship look like in adulthood?
There are so many kinds of healthy sibling relationships. There is no one kind. I think as long as one feels connected to one sibling, and overall there is a sense of support. Maybe moment to moment you may agree or disagree, or not like, or like something. But if you feel that they add something to your life. They're a source of support. For me, one of the moments when I felt I really appreciated having siblings and was when I lost my father. I was 29 years old. And, when you lose a parent, it's like, at that point in time, it felt like, I've just been left adrift. I had a spouse and all of that, but you just feel alone in a very specific way, a very different way. Your siblings are the ones who are still here, through whom you're still connected. And you're connected with, your family or your parents. You have a common past, those common memories that you have together. That kind of feeling you don't have in any other relationship. And that's something that's really precious.
In India, we don't necessarily use the words, we love you, I love you. And you don't need to, because actions speak louder than anything. How important, though, is it to actually spell it out?
I think it's always nice to hear, right? Even if a friend or a spouse or parent or whoever or child never says it, but when they do say it, you like it. Everybody likes it. In India, we're not usually very expressive, and within that, each family is also different. Some families, are more expressive than others, or physically demonstrative. There'll be hugs and things like that. Other families, they won't. All of that stuff. But I think everybody likes to hear it. So if one can get around to saying it more often, it helps.
All siblings who feel distant, hurt, or misunderstood by their other sibling or others, what's one small step they can take to reconnect?
Talk to the person, pick up the phone and call, or go meet. When you sit down in the presence of somebody else, a lot of things melt away. There is a lot of value in physical presence. The way would be to just go and meet without an agenda of trying to sort things out or necessarily express, your hurt, whatever, but just to connect, just to be with them. That may lead to other conversations and other sorting out of things if needed.
And that's a perfect place to really end sibling relationships in India, like money plants. Really, they just grow. And we don't even know how they do, but they just do. And in India, we don't give enough importance to sibling relationships. We rarely give the other that much importance and time, and yet it's probably, and I reiterate this, going to be the closest bond you share with someone without even acknowledgement. Something that is bound to reflect in the way you handle your friendships and even your love relationships. And I don't want to get too much into this aspect, but having lost my only sibling, I know what it is to lose a piece of your heart that you didn't even know existed. Thank you all for joining us. May this Rakhi be a time of healing, reflection, and the courage to grow with those who knew you when you were still becoming yourself. Thank you very much, Doc, for always holding our hands in discussions like this. It's important to have these discussions. And I'm so happy we could do that on the occasion of Rakhi.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking about it.